So looking at the carbohydrates that have calories, we have monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. So in the monosaccharides, we have glucose, fructose, and galactose. Glucose is the body's main sugar. This is in part because when we store sugar in the body, we store it as glycogen, which is long chains of glucose. But it's also because anytime we need fructose and galactose, they're both precursors for certain molecules, we just convert glucose into them. But that being said, we can convert galactose back into glucose, and we can convert fructose directly into glycogen or into fat. So the thing to mention about these monosaccharides is that if you drink a sweet drink that has these in solution, uh, they get absorbed immediately by the stomach lining and added to the bloodstream. So you get a really strong sugar spike. Disaccharides, on the other hand, are absorbed a little bit slower because, as their name indicates, they're two sugars stuck to one another. And so before they can be absorbed, they have to be attacked by an enzyme that splits them in half. But the difference is in absorption is probably not all that great because there are a lot of these enzymes and they act really quite fast. So polysaccharides finally in the diet is starch. And so these are long chains of glucose primarily. But again, in the stomach, we have enzymes that break starch down very, very fast that pop off the glucose. And so one thing I'll mention about glycogen is that uh, it's a slow process for us forming glycogen, uh, and so when I said earlier how in high concentrations of glucose, and I think the same is true for fructose, uh, that they get turned to fat. It's actually that there's a certain amount of these sugars that's always, as soon as there's a surplus, that's being turned to glycogen, but the formation of glycogen is so slow that it's just not enough. And so the rest, in the majority, in large quantities, it has to go to fat. So why do carbohydrates matter so much? They're definitely multi-purpose. We can convert them to fat and to amino acids. They're a precursor for countless other molecules. We can store them as glycogen. We can burn them either anaerobically or aerobically. But more than anything, is just a question of how they're able to make it to the brain. The brain runs on sugar, and so when you're low, when your sugars are low, your blood sugars, your moods are affected, and so it's no surprise that everybody's so hungry for sweets. So I'll talk for a minute about high fructose corn syrup, which a lot of people are focused on these days. And so the problem with HFCS is not that it's unnatural or anything like that. It's actually pretty much the same thing as honey. And the way that it's created is natural in the sense that um, they uh, they take starch from corn and they then take an isolated amount of the enzymes that are present in our stomach and in plants and microbes and everywhere else. They take these enzymes, then add them to the starch to have it be converted into glucose, and then they add the enzymes that convert glucose to fructose to generate a mix that ends up being pretty much the same thing as honey. And so the problem with HFCS is not that it's unnatural. It's not like this is stuff that's being created through organic chemistry. It's created using the same enzymes that the plants use to make honey. The problem is that, say, a 2-liter Pepsi has 216 grams of carbs. That's the equivalent of 13 tablespoons of honey. And so if your drink during the day is Pepsi, then it's really not difficult to drink 2 liters. And that's a huge amount of sugar that really is not, that gets digested too fast. And so the real solution to HFCS is simply to avoid it and to consume it in the same way that you might consume honey in a normal diet. So looking at fat now, first off, the purpose of fat in the body, obviously it's our main energy storage. Fat is much more calorically dense than sugar. it's also the primary component of our cell walls. Whereas plants have a sugar-based cell wall, animals and microbes have a fat-based cell wall. So you need actually quite a bit of fat just to have a cell. And finally, it's also a precursor for quite a few fat-based molecules like hormones. And so the one thing I'd like to highlight about fat is that our daily consumption of fat is actually quite significant. So the skin that we grow every day, the oils that are produced by the skin, the heart surely is when it's throughout its beats is consuming quite a bit of fat. And so my point here is that there's not much reason to avoiding fat in the diet, in the sense that the body doesn't want to release the fat that's stored, and it's going to look for the fat that it needs in its daily consumption from the diet. And so the typical low-fat diet, which is rich in sugars, obviously, has sugars that are just being converted to fat instead of, say, just using the fat directly from nutrition. So having a little bit of fat in the diet is not going to go to fat storage. It's going to be used by these different processes, and cutting out fat is not really going to necessarily result in there being a consumption of fat from adipose tissue. So beyond that is the question of balance. Having too much fat is obviously bad, but having too little fat is also really quite bad. So especially for women, if you're training really hard, doing a lot of fat burning exercise, it's definitely not a good thing to have too low a body fat composition. I do want to mention a little bit of heart disease. It really does matter. We all tend to think about the present and kind of forget what life will be when we're 20 years older than we are now, or 50 years older than we are now, or once we reach 50 or 60 or 70. I'm 37 myself. The thing is that it's a childish thing to think that you don't want to live past 70, because frankly, when you're 70, I'll be surprised if you still feel the same. Once you get there, you're going to think to yourself, no, actually, I'd like to live a little bit longer. I'm not quite yet ready. But more importantly, it's not a question of reaching 70 or reaching 50 or whatever. It's the quality of life you have at that age. So if you suffer from heart disease, then that means that you can't walk up 2 flights of stairs without being really winded. You can't do any exercise without really struggling to get oxygen and nutrients to the rest of your body. It probably means that even at rest, most of your body is not getting all of the nutrients and so on that it needs, which makes you even look older than you would otherwise. So, ignoring heart disease is not a smart thing to do, and adapting to what you do, making the changes that you need to make to have a healthy heart decades later is not that hard. And so I really encourage you to think about it. So with that in mind, what is it that's bad about fat, or what is it that we need to watch out with heart disease with our diets? Animal fat is really, really, really bad. It clogs the arteries. And so you should avoid cheese and dairy. It's unfortunate because what I'm discussing here about an ideal diet is one that has not sugar by itself ever. You should always have sugar with fat and protein, and having, say, bread with cheese kind of gives you the full mix. It's a good thing for a snack, but unfortunately the fat that's in there is the bad fat. And so if you're going to be having it every single day for your life, that adds up, and it's not a good habit. So similarly, you should avoid fatty cuts of meat.